Well, it's certainly no secret that the K100 has been out and on the road for a few days now, and I actually took you guys along to film these slide shots, so this is hardly a super secret reveal, and anyone who has been paying any sort of attention knows that, well, this is where we are with the build. But it's been about a month since the last episode, and I'm sure y'all are interested in exactly how we got to this point. Well, here's the thing. This has been the most time-crunched phase of the build because the end goal of bringing this bike to the public eye at the Motofellas bike show. And honestly, there's no way I could have done this alone, so I owe many folks some heartfelt thank yous for your generosity and, just the kindness that they showed me. Bear with me, we'll begin building in a sec, but I have to start off with those who were kind enough to help out through Patreon, as they were able to help expedite the process of getting this thing roadworthy. So thank you to Ahmed Al-Shamsi, Alec Muti, Antonio Grooms, Axel Hinnenkamp, Benjamin Buse, Billy Tellier, Bill Skarnir, Brad Coe, Brandon Stanley, Brap, Brett Bohe, Bryn, Carpe Cerebrum, Chums Knifeblade, Coach Redpill, Damian Lawson, Danny Huey, David Mendez, David Rivera, Dennis Chestnut, Dominic Van Rogers, Douglas Schmidt, Drew Martinet, Duke Langson, Eddie's Days, Edvin Ekblad, Essex Hammer, Evan Flatt, Fahim, Flash Rider RR, Gary M. Parks, Gavin Hawks, Gawain, Grant Goldsmith, Ian, Jace Haynes, Janelle Fairchild, Jarrett Sams, Jackson Quill, Jens, Jerry Linton Jr., John Peter Gasvik, John Ploskina, John, Jason, Kevin A. Arbertha, Kyle Taylor, Marcus Ricardo Smallwood, Michael Knapp, Mikey Pay, Milan Kruger, Nate Beatty, Nishk, No Thanks, Patriot and NZ, Philip Von Medding, Rodney Miller, Roger Vanderberg, Ron Engelbert, Rusty Shackelford, Sam Markhand, Sammy Sam, Sean Kelly, Stephen Cooper, Thomas Fruhauf, Ugly Lucifer, Vincent Lee, and Z Vasiliev, and a couple others who asked not to be named. You guys legitimately helped make this side goal happen, and I'm thankful for that. Now, the last episode had ended with me getting the bike to run, but the problem was that even though the engine was firing reliably, it didn't respond well to throttle, and the revs would hang before they dropped back down to idle. It was also missing a few doodads and stuff to make it safely rideable. At the end of the last episode, I also mentioned that if I really pick up the pace, I could potentially take the bike in a prototype state to a bike show that was scheduled to happen a month from then. We had our goal, and it was time to get cracking. Step one was to sort out the exhaust, and the simplest way to do that would be just to revive the stock one that came with the bike instead of spending money on a new one that could be used on something else. With that said, the stock headers were pretty damn rough, and aside from the dents that we put into them, the rust had eaten through one pipe and actually put these deep fissures everywhere else. To make them nice would have been way more effort than they were worth, because after all, the next best thing to fixing your problems is to hide them. So I picked up some exhaust wrap and some silicone coating, some heat application steel putty, and I managed to score some free steel zip ties because the pack was opened at the store. I swear, I didn't open it myself. To get the best adhesion of the steel putty, you gotta clean up the surface you're gonna use it on. So I took a steel brush to the holes on the headers and cleared off the rust. In order to activate the putty, you have to just, roll and knead it around like dough until it starts to heat up in your hands. Then you apply it and, spread it around so it can set and harden. You can set it for a long time and then, sand it down for a better appearance, but this was going under the wrap in this case, so honestly, I didn't really care how it looked. Speaking of the wrap, it's recommended that you wet it a little bit to make it more flexible when you're wrapping pipes. Now, I've wrapped my Honda Rebel pipes in the past, and it was annoying as hell, but it was easier because the pipes were still on the bike, and it was only a 2-cylinder bike with a 2x2 exhaust pipe system. But this fucker right here is basically like trying to exhaust wrap someone's DNA. The collector pipe was the easy part, but after that, it was just too hard to focus on wrapping and also keeping the pipes in front of the camera, so I just did the rest off camera. Wrapping pipes sucks because all of the little fibers that just end up everywhere. But this was the final product. Cylinders 3 and 4 were too close to each other to really wrap separately until the very top area of the pipes, but I honestly like that chunky double wrap look, With the wrap ends at the ports, it got a little bit messy because of the frayed out pieces of wrap, but with how low the bike sits, you honestly have to be taking a dirt nap to really see those flaws, and by then, that's probably the least of your worries. These are the crush washers that seal against the pipes and the head to kill off any leaks that would exist from the exhaust port. I bought 8 of them because now I can use 4 with this temporary setup, and then I can use the remaining 4 when I actually finish the bike for good. So I hooked up the pipes and I enjoyed that horrible yet barbecue smelling smoke that gets produced when you're curing exhaust wraps. Now the K-Series has this notorious breather hose that ends up breaking over time, causing a sort of unsuspecting vacuum leak that will end up making the bike run like shit. By that point, I had already ordered a replacement for that hose, along with some other run right bits since it was such a cheap part. I hadn't actually checked that hose until I finished with the exhaust, and holy hell was this thing pretty much split in two at the top. I didn't want to replace it yet because I was still waiting on some other parts, and I kind of wanted to install all the run right bits at once and then just listen to the final result. But still, scratch one up for proactivity. but that job will have to be saved for another day. And that next day of work came on a Friday of the same week. Another overcast and humid day in Brooklyn. You want to get fried under the direct sun or sweat like a whore in church? Pick your poison. That morning, for Patreon, I did a parts rundown since I was sitting on quite a few things that needed to be installed. I'll just let myself take it away for a second here. So first up are the tires. Now the front is the 120/70 ZR17 Angel ST, and really these are just your standard fare Japanese super sport size tires, so nothing really special about that. So you could get these in basically any super sport size. But what gave me trouble was the rear tire, because this is actually an 18. So the rim, the yellow rim that I have out there is actually an 18. It's not a 17. So that kind of limits my choice in tires. And it also makes it more expensive because they don't really sell those as much. So this tire was like maybe like 160 alone. It was really expensive. So, but I mean, it's a pretty nice tire. I like the tread pattern. I like the little GT that they have there. But yeah, you can actually see that this is a GT, the other one is a ST. And the reason for that is because, well, my choices are so limited, but I wanted to stay Pirelli, so. Now this is a V-Rod headlight, and it has this downsloping shape, and it kind of looks like the MV Agusta Brutali's headlight, but this is a Harley Davidson headlight. And the thing I like about this is that it's actually in really good condition. And also, I like the fact that this lens is actually glass. This is not plastic. This is real glass. So, I mean, if you drop it, it's done. But it looks nice. It makes it stay kind of like crystal clear, you know? Because plastic tends to yellow and fog and stuff like that. But this is really nice. I don't even know what year this is, but the problem is, actually, let me show you that again. The problem is that this uses the H11 bulb, which I've never even seen before. You can see on the top. It's H11 LL Phillips, and the bottom one is Phillips H9, which I've never seen before either. So I got all of this wiring crap to basically try to rig up the headlight through a bunch of like chain connectors. Now this box is called the Run Right box, and it's filled with a bunch of stuff that I'm going to use to get the K100 to run right. So I got the proper size intake hose. So I got new fuel injectors. These are brand new. Got the spark plugs, which I already had. I got some fuel injector clips. Money that you guys put together, I was actually able to get this way earlier than I thought I was gonna have to. So honestly, I don't know if I would have been able to even get this. I would have probably had to just make the Bandit shock work. With all that said, it was time to get to work and prioritize just installing the run right bits in order to make sure that it would respond to throttle well enough to be rideable. First step was to replace that breather hose. The next step was to replace those old injectors. Then I focused my efforts on changing out that intake hose that was slightly too large that I rigged up with silicone tape. An Instagrammer by the name of Spencer B89 was using a similar setup to mine, and after I told him that this red hose is not the correct size and to stay away from it, he actually followed up later and directed me to a hose of the correct diameter, which I definitely appreciated. So thank you again, Spencer. That's way better. That's perfect. Now, here's where I messed up. I didn't secure this rig well enough, and this resulted in the air sensor and the filter bobbing up and down when the bike hits bumps putting undue stress on the old brittle rubber of the throttle bodies, causing some splits. So watch this bite us in the ass later. It's gonna suck. Everything was going to plan until the lithium battery had gotten too low on charge to start up the bike, unfortunately. Anyway, next step was the spark plugs, which needed to be replaced and gapped according to BMW specs. A very simple job indeed. All you need is a gapper tool and the correct gap value needed. So the manual calls for a spark plug gap of 0.024 inches to 0.028 inches. It should be in this lower, so where that little tick mark, because I actually already checked one of the spark plugs that was already in the bike. And then you slide it, because it increases in width gradually, as you can see. So you put this through there, and then you basically just slide it until you feel resistance. And that's definitely not in spec. So to bring it out, it's kind of like a bottle opener. So you kind of hook it on that, and then you bring it out like that. We apply some force to it. If you have to close the gap, then you just push it with this. So this spark plug was real oily. It's like still wet. Just let it warm up. So this is how it starts up after all that. And listen to the throttle response. The popping ain't as bad, so I'm not too worried about it. It's only really at high RPM when you drop it. But yeah, that's miles better. I mean, it actually responds to throttle. It could actually reach high RPM. I think I almost reached redline with that one. So yeah, I'm happy with that, for sure. I also picked up this gasket maker because where the valve cover is, at the bottom and on the top, they always leak. So I've seen that one thing that people do is that they just put it along that little curve on the top and the bottom, and it seals everything up. So I'm guessing that 50 is for the top, and then 54 is for the bottom. But yeah, that's pretty much it. It's just a real minimal, clean looking headlight bracket kit. So this is the spot that I was talking about where it always leaks. All around there. I had enough daylight left to fiddle around with the V-Rod headlight, so I ripped open that MOTODEMIC headlight bracket and I started mounting it up. So I got the headlight mounted, sort of. I need longer bolts of a different size, but it's too high. So that's basically the lowest it could go because it changes width after that for the top one, the 50 mil, and it can't go any lower than that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get another 54, so the top one can mount down here, and then I'll have this whole area to play with. Because right now, that's way too high, obviously. Yeah, that is way too high. That looks freakish. Yeah, so I'm gonna see if I can get some 54s, these loops, and then just throw them on the top and just drop everything down. It should be simple. These bolts aren't long enough. They aren't the right size either. So I kind of have to like put bushings on the side. So yeah, I'm gonna have to get smaller. I think these will work. I basically lined up the headlight to where I would want it to go, and that's basically where I would want it to sit. So it was basically all the way down to the bottom with a triple. So I would get another one, another 54, and then put it right here, and then it'll be snug. And then I'll get those bolts, the proper bolts. I also threw this this X on there. You see, even with the V-Rod headlight lowered into the place that I would want it to sit, I still just honestly wasn't a fan of the way it looked on this particular bike because it was just extremely bulky and it stuck out too far. I do honestly believe we're stretching out the definition of a cafe racer as it is, and this headlight sort of gives me more of a Street Fighter vibe as well. Some patrons suggested that I just run a mount that would bring the headlight closer to the forks, but that would present clearance issues for the bulbs. Considering another set of 54mm rings alone for MOTODEMIC would cost me an absolutely criminal 80 bucks, I had to think fast about which headlight I was gonna run. The V-Rod headlight and the MOTODEMIC brackets were the high quality premium option, but I was gonna have to race to the bottom, the absolute bottom now. But sometimes less is more, right? But before I show you that, we actually earned another sponsor this time around in the form of 3R Design. They're an auto parts manufacturer based in the UK that develops different interior trim pieces and exterior parts for cars, but more importantly for us, they also have an interest in the BMW K series of bikes with parts like fuel injector rail covers made from brushed stainless steel. The shop operates on eBay with a 99.9% positive rating, but they also have an Instagram in which they show their love for K-bikes and are open to selling products used on their own projects if asked. In this case, they were kind enough to produce an air filter adapter that has an upsweep that gives a much more aggressive look than the adapter that simply goes straight out from the air sensor. They were even kind enough to change the design to fit the air filter inlet diameter for the air filter that I already have, so it was a direct swap. I didn't even have to buy another air filter. So thank you 3R Design, that was very much appreciated. Oh, and you can see that headlight from here too. It's a $20 headlight from Amazon, and it's cheap as hell, but what matters is it bolts on since it came with its own bracket. It actually works no problem since it's H4 and it came with a bulb, but that day had some more involved work, shall we say, than an air filter and a headlight. In fact, I had to literally split the bike in half to address an annoying ass problem that I was putting off for a long time. You guys remember when I removed the clutch way back? Yeah, I put it back, but I didn't actually torque it down, for the bolts that hold it into place, because this bike has a really annoying thing where you kind of need a clutch aligning tool to reinstall everything correctly. Well, let me explain. So there's this spindle that goes from the transmission into the center of the clutch, and if it isn't lined up, then you pretty much can't mount the transmission to the motor. Now, the clutch plates will slide around in there if you don't torque it down, which is great because you'll have some play when it comes to installing the transmission, lining everything up. It'll slide around until it falls into place. If you kind of jimmy everything around, then you'll eventually get it into place. But then that leaves you with a loose clutch that won't actually move the bike. Like, the engine will run, but good luck getting that shit to engage without spinning around like an idiot as soon as you put it into first. Granted, it didn't matter because the bike is behind the house and it's going nowhere. But the plan was to change that, obviously. So I bought what they call a clutch alignment tool. And what that does is it simulates the transmission spindle so you can torque down the clutch bolts and then put the transmission back on while everything is still lined up. Some people have methods to do this without the tool, and I know somebody's gonna comment like, oh, this is how I do it. But this is by far the easiest way. Also, this is the clutch rod boot that notoriously rips if you so much as look at it funny. Mine needed replacing, which I do a few days later. That's a $40 asshole part, man, for a dumb piece of rubber. After the clutch was set up, I took the opportunity to remove that useless center stand since we cut the left leg to fit the bigger rear wheel. Eventually, this part will be replaced by a K100 center stand, which features wider legs to accommodate the rear wheel. These mock-up tires served me well with their dry rod and exposed steel, but it was time to upgrade to a sweet set of Pirelli Angels. Thing is, I don't own a car, and I'm not Superman, so I had to carry each wheel with the accompanying new tire to the tire shop in 2 separate round trips. And let me tell you, that wasn't fun on a 90-something degree day. But eventually the tires were both mounted, front and back, and the bike was beginning to look more and more roadworthy. Next up was addressing the shock, and again, I just love how easily this linkage just pops right off. Just 2 bolts and it comes off as a single piece. The issue here is that the linkage has mounting holes meant for 12mm bolts, and the shock uses 10mm, meaning there is a lot of play at either end of the shock. This new red YSS shock also has the same issue, but I wasn't going to drill into the new one and potentially mess it up. So I used the Bandit shock as a test dummy to see if it was even possible. To start, I oiled up the fork end of the shock, and I got to drilling with the closest sized bit that I had. Eventually I made it through both ends of the fork cleanly, Unfortunately, the eye end of this shock has a rubber bushing outside of a thin metal ring instead of a fully metal roller. And if I drove that out, I would pretty much ruin the shock. The fork end was now a perfect fit, and I used the 12mm bolts that came with the linkage just fine, but unfortunately I had to use the same 10mm bolts at the eye. This would still be better than having slop at both ends at the same time. I had saved the drilling out of the red shock until the day that I could visit Keith again, since he actually owns a professional drill press. Simply put, this setup would hold me until then just fine. The K100 was now officially roadworthy, but the tragedy of it all was that I would have to tear this pretty much complete bike down to scraps in order to get it out of the prison that is my backyard. Here we go again. But it wasn't all that bad, thanks to another sponsor who had gifted me some goodies to rock at the bike show. An up-and-coming apparel company by the name of MOTOSMITHS had actually gifted me 2 stickers. One was of a pre-existing design called MOTOSMITHS Attack, rallying us bike builders onto the road. The other was a custom flying brick sticker, specifically designed for this build, and it came out absolutely badass. The other was a stretchy, high-quality, breathable tri-blend t-shirt featuring MOTOSMITHS text and a custom Bonneville Cafe racer. Absolutely perfect shirt for the show, so thank you so much for that, guys. Everything here and a lot more is available on MOTOSMITHS' website, even a flying brick sticker which has now been made available to the public. So if you have your own K-bike that you want to rock this sticker on, feel free to hit up their store and their Instagram. Tell them the crazy guy from Brooklyn sent you. Now, you'll have to bear with me, because I didn't actually really film much of the teardown and build-up job for moving the bike from the back of my house to the front of my house, simply because it's such a stressful and involved job, and I was just focused on getting it done, not on filming it. But I did mention in a Patreon video that the way I planned to get the bike out was to use my patented 3-chunk method. This means taking out the front wheel, the front end, and the frame together as one piece, like a wheelbarrow, then separating the tranny from the engine and rolling the rear wheel, axle, swing arm, and tranny out as one piece. Those 2 chunks I can actually get out by myself, since they'll be rolled on each wheel that's still connected to them. But again, I'm not Superman and I can't lift the engine alone, so with that part I just get some help carrying it through the basement, and then I put it back on the lift to reassemble everything from there. It takes a while, but I have no other choice. Fast forward several hours later, and the K100 was on the road. And the shakedown ride went exactly as you'd expect, with discovering a problem. The goddamn rear lug bolts had gotten loose, and I was too far from home to just walk it. I couldn't hand tighten it enough to roll for more than a block or 2. It would start wobbling like, I even had to ask a guy for tools because for some reason I didn't bring any with me. Alright, thanks. Have a good night. Anyone who's built anything knows the dreaded shakedown ride. Something always goes wrong. So the next morning I stopped by Advanced Auto and got some red Loctite, aka some fuck you sauce. And I dipped those bolts red like Chinese chicken before installing them. Never happened again. This is footage of the ride on the way to Keith that same morning.
It's live!
Yeah, it's fucking loud.
Yeah, I heard you. Right here.
But just my luck, it started raining when it was time to leave Keith, because that's life, right? While I get soaked here, let me just explain what happened at the shop. So I went in with 4 jobs. Job number 1 was to drill out the red shock the same way I did the black shock, but with professional machines. That got completed. Job 2 was to weld a nut on a little axle stud for the rear shock mount, to remove it and install the longer one that has a smooth section for the linkage pivot. Done. Job 3 was to finally heat and re-angle the subframe, which we actually did, but only about halfway. We angled them in a fair bit and it worked, but In order to avoid setting anything on fire with the heat, Keith recommended just coming back with the bare frame before I send it to powder coat so we don't start, melting shit on the assembled bike. The last job was to move the tank mounts back, but again, he recommended doing that with a bare frame. Now, with that said, one would think that the suspension would be sorted out since we did all of the jobs pertaining to it. But actually, the red shock turned out to be way too harsh, which I complained about in a Patreon exclusive moto vlog from last Friday. So next Friday, I reinstalled the black shock, which made for a much less painful ride. Perhaps later on I could change out the spring itself on a red one, but the bandit shock was just fine for now. Besides, by the time the show day came, which was about 2 days later on Sunday, I had much bigger problems to worry about. You see, despite all of the suspension issues, the bike ran reliably. Maybe slightly lean, but all that did was produce pops. It didn't actually affect anything else. Unfortunately, that had begun to change at the worst possible time, the morning of the show. And I'll let myself explain it live. Panicky moment because the bike refused to start this morning, and I have no idea why. But I ended up dropping the throttle because I brought it up thinking that it'll warm up a little easier, but I had to drop it back down. That's the only way it would start running. I'm just happy that it's running, because that was a real tense moment. I thought I was gonna have to call it off, but I'm about to get there. I'm getting there at the very end of the entry time. So the setup ends at 11, and the judging starts at 11:15. Which on the topic, I didn't realize there would be judges. I don't see this thing winning anything, but if people want to see it, then they come see it. I'll probably get there between 11 and 11:15. Not only that, but the process of starting the bike over and over, the battery actually died during it. So literally the morning of the show, I'm sitting there watching the battery charge, wondering every 5 minutes, is that enough to charge the bike? Because I had figured out that for the present problem, the idle was just set too high. Now, I just needed the battery to try again. Hey!
Beautiful, man.
Thanks. Dude, tense morning. Super tense because I hate being late to shit. But I made it, and the judging actually started late because one of the judges themselves were late. That's life, right? So she didn't want to start?
Oh, man. Luckily you made it.
I didn't actually get a chance to wash the bike yet, so I just wiped it down to get some of the grime off. Like I said, the judging started late, and the venue, which was the Brooklyn Beer Garden, technically didn't open until 1, so I spent some time walking around and talking to folks about their bikes. I like this tailpiece.
Yeah, thank you. That's off of a Yamaha. Maybe that's why you like it.
I had more done. He actually, the past 2 weeks, he got hit last night too. Mark.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, he's been some shit, But yeah, so he got hit, but the past 2 weeks he got hit twice and vandalized. I had blinkers on there. I wound up taking off my horn. I took off the blinkers. They vandalized the compressor.
Wow.
Air shock.
Yeah.
So I could bring him home. That would have fucking killed me, bro.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, but now I still have the air tank still on it. And that air tank was my NOS bottle for my drag bike.
Nice.
Caught on fire.
Whatever it may be, tell the story behind it, because all that goes into the maximum effort. Does anyone have any questions?
Once the venue actually opened, things had started to get crowded, and I had met up with a couple viewers who had come to the show, as well as a few content creators and influencers in the New York City moto scene. Even folks who just recognized the bike alone from Instagram, like independent of me. But special shout out to Liam and Devin. You guys know who you are. At around 4 p.m., the votes were in, which included those submitted by the judges and the public. That old chopper had actually won 2 trophies. The Mad Max CB750 had won 1, and I forget who won the other trophy. Fun fact, I actually rode with the guy who owns that CB750 way back when I was riding that GSXS that was loaned to me. It has certainly progressed since the last time I seen it, and it won the award for maximum effort, which I fully support. The event kept going until 9 p.m., but I actually left at 4:30 because I didn't want to be out too late with no taillight.
Thank you all very much. Thank you. Also want to show some love to our hosts. This awesome space. Beer is wonderful. Bikes are better. It all goes together extremely well. Thank you guys for hosting us. What happened to the red seat that I saw on Instagram?
Oh no, the brown one. Yeah, it doesn't fit. Yeah, it doesn't fit. It falls right through. It's too narrow.
Oh, so it's too wide at the front here?
Yeah. And then we bent them in, but it doesn't match that angle. So I need to get something that tapers. So what he was saying is to get a skateboard and maybe I could file it down to match that angle.
Let's hear it, bro.
I can't. They don't want me to start it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they want me to sneak out.
Are you gonna push it out?
Yeah.
And then start it out that?
Yeah, by his bike.
Like it's loud as fuck?
It's pretty loud. Yeah. Good seeing you.
Right safe, man.
Yeah.
The illustrator.
The illustrator in the flesh.
Thank you.
And so I made my exit from the venue, getting ready to ride out with Devin, but those dreaded problems were still waiting for me on the way out.
Just trying to keep it alive. I'm sorry, man. You get to witness firsthand.
Same way with my old bike.
Yeah. All I gotta do is make it back home. Just trying to limp this thing back home after the show. It's hanging in there. Yeah. Man, when you watch this, thank you so much for riding with me, man. I appreciate that. Okay, now what I'm gonna do is see if dropping the idle might help this thing run a little bit better. Live problems, man, live problems. I actually had some trouble getting into the show this morning. It was doing more or less the same thing, but if I drop the idle, now that it's warmed up, it should run a little bit better. Yo, I can't wait to go home and fucking get some cold water, man. It was hot out there. The show was fun as fuck, though. Well, let's see what happens. Alright, so far so good.
Again, shout out to Devin for putting up with my shitty bike refusing to cooperate. But despite that, as you can probably tell, I did enjoy the event, and I went home feeling extremely accomplished about everything. Making it to the show felt like a shot in the dark from the start. But despite all of the odds, I fucking made it, and I had a good time there to boot. The following day, I uploaded that video, highlighting the troubles of running the bike that I was having, and I'm sure you all watched that. I also uploaded a follow-up that demonstrated exactly what the issue happened to be, and it's exactly what I expected it to be. It was the failure to secure the air sensor and the air filter correctly that came back to bite us in the ass. I've already spoken to K-Bike guru Ditstang, who does throttle body rebuilds, and I plan to send him mine soon. I've already made preparations to put the bike back, and by the time this video comes out, it will likely already be back in the workshop, as to not lose sight of the final vision of the build. This build will continue, and I'll be spending more time making the bike look good and also function like new. It was a good run, but the bike has spoken and it calls for more wrenching. We made it through 7 rides in a week, with no trouble from cops for riding an unfinished bike, and thankfully no permanent stranding. I think we can all call this a win, and quit while we're ahead, so to speak. Besides, I got a hot little redhead who's been waiting for me. Thanks for checking out episode 7 of the K100 build series. You just watched the illustrator. I'll see you on the next one.